The sound of rushing water woke me before the alarm clock ever could. It was still dark outside, that grainy blue-black shade of morning where the stars are fading but the sun hasn't yet made a claim on the sky. At first, I thought it was rain hitting the gutters, a rare treat in our drought-choked suburb. But no, the hiss had a rhythm, a controlled gush like a hose turned on full blast. I sighed, rolled out of bed, and slid my feet into slippers. This wasn't the first time I'd heard it. The tank was supposed to be sealed and locked. I had checked it twice this week, but somehow, every time I turned my back, the water levels dipped lower than they should. I grabbed the flashlight off the nightstand, its heavy aluminum handle reassuring in my grip, and stepped out into the cool pre-dawn air. Sure enough, the sound was louder outside, spilling from the side of the property where the storage tank stood like a silent sentinel. I clicked the beam on and swept it across the gravel path. The light fell on her, Karen. Her peroxide blonde I frizzed at the edges, catching the glow of my flashlight like a halo made of static. She was wearing her usual walking gear. Tight pink tracksuit, spotless white sneakers, and that smug, untouchable aura she carried like perfume. Her hands were clenched around the valve at the base of my water tank, twisting it wide open, sending gallons of clean, precious water gurgling out like it was her personal spigot. Karen. My voice cracked the silence of the neighborhood, sharp enough to make her flinch. She spun around, eyes wide for a fraction of a second before she recognized me. Then her face settled into that practiced mask she wore at every HOA meeting. Smug superiority, like she had the law tucked under her arm. "Oh, good morning," she said breezily, as though I hadn't caught her red-handed. "You really ought to consider making this tank more accessible. It's a little inconvenient." I took a step closer, the gravel crunching underfoot. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" As she straightened, crossed her arms, and planted her sneakers in that stance she thought made her look powerful. "What does it look like?" "Watering my lawn. I'm not about to let my azaleas die just because you think you own the sky. If you're draining my tank." I shot back. "That's not a garden hose, Karen. That's my property." She gave a dismissive laugh, one of those little scoffs that seemed engineered to make your blood boil. "Property, please. The HOA voted last spring that water resources must be shared among residents during drought conditions. You can't just hoard it all for your." Stared at her, dumbfounded. "The HOA voted on my tank." "You mean the tank that I installed on my land with my money? The tank I pay to maintain and fill?" Her eyes glittered with condescension. "Yes, well, it doesn't matter whose yard it sits in. It's community property now. Think of it as civic duty." I felt my jaw tighten. "That's not how property rights work, Karen. You can't just declare something community property because you want free water." "Free?" She barked a laugh sharp and ugly. Believe me, I've paid enough in HOA fees to cover more than my share of water. If you're going to keep such a massive tank, you should be expected to share. Don't be so selfish." "Selfish." My voice rose, echoing faintly across the still street. A porch light flicked on 2 houses down, someone curious about the commotion. I didn't care. "Karen, this isn't about sharing. It's about you trespassing, tampering with my property, and stealing my water in the middle of the night." She tilted her head, lips pursed in mock pity. "Stealing is a strong word. It's called redistribution." I had to bite down hard to stop myself from laughing at the absurdity of it. Redistribution. That was her excuse for emptying my tank, the tank that stood as the only reason my family could shower more than twice a week. "Karen," I said slowly, my flashlight beam steady on her face. "If you keep draining this tank, you'll regret it, because it doesn't just feed my house." Her brow furrowed for a split second, but she smoothed it out just as quickly. Like she didn't want me to see she was rattled. "Are you threatening me?" "Oh no," I said evenly. "I'm warning you. You're playing with something you don't understand." She rolled her eyes so hard I could practically hear them scrape. "Please, don't give me your doomsday routine. It's water. People need water. You're not the gatekeeper of this neighborhood's survival." I stepped closer, closing the gap until we were only a few feet apart. "If you think I'm bluffing, go ahead. Keep draining it. But when things go dry, don't come knocking on my door. Don't blame me when you can't flush your toilet or run your sprinklers. That'll be on you, Karen. Only you." She didn't like that. I could see it in the twitch of her jaw, the way her hands curled tighter around her arms, nails digging into the fabric of her tracksuit. Still, she forced a smirk onto her face, like she always did when someone challenged her throne. "Well," she said with false cheer, "if that's how you feel, I suppose we'll just have to bring it up at the next HOA meeting. Majority rules, after all." She gave the valve one last twist before letting go, satisfied, and started strutting away down the gravel path as though she hadn't just been caught stealing. "You'll be hearing from us," she tossed over her shoulder. I watched her vanish into the dim glow of the streetlights, my fists clenched at my sides. The hiss of the draining tank had slowed now, but the damage was done. She thought this was about grass and azaleas. She had no idea she was sawing through the branch she was standing on. The tank would hold, for now. But Karen had just set something in motion that would wash her smug little empire away. And the irony of it all, she wouldn't see it coming until the faucets in her own house went dry. 3 days later, the neighborhood was in chaos. It started small. Just a trickle of HOA group chat. Someone posted at 6 in the morning, "Is anyone else's water pressure weird?" By 9, the chat had exploded. Toilets weren't flushing. Sinks were running dry. Sprinklers sputtered and coughed like asthmatic machines. By noon, the neighborhood was a full-blown panic zone. Pickup trucks pulled into driveways and idled while their owners stomped around with arms flailing, muttering into phones. Mothers with messy ponytails and toddlers on their hips stood at the ends of their driveways, shouting across the street about how long it had been since anyone had showered. Lawn guys looked bewildered, standing in front of hoses that refused to give them a drop. I sat on my porch with my coffee, the same mug I always used in the mornings, letting the chaos unfold like free theater. The tank behind my house was bone dry thanks to Karen's little midnight escapades. And the backup line it supported for the street had collapsed like a pulled thread unraveling a sweater. I warned her. I warned her clear as day. But she hadn't listened. She never listened. The sound of screeching tires announced her before she even appeared. Karen's silver SUV shot around the corner, rattling with the kind of reckless speed only desperation produces. She parked crookedly in front of my house, the front tire bumping halfway onto my curb. The door flew open, and out stormed Karen herself. Hair frizzed, tracksuit wrinkled, sunglasses perched on her head like they'd been yanked off in haste. She looked less like a queen and more like a dethroned dictator stumbling out of exile. "You!" she shrieked, marching up my driveway with all the fury of someone who had finally realized they'd been played by their own arrogance. "This is your fault." I set my mug down on the armrest of my chair, leaned back, and raised an eyebrow. "My fault?" "Yes," she snapped, jabbing a finger at me like she was handing down a guilty verdict. "The whole street is out of water because of you and your selfish little tank." I almost laughed, but instead I folded my hands calmly in my lap. Funny, I seem to remember warning you this would happen. You drained it dry. That tank wasn't just for me. It was feeding the backup system the whole neighborhood relies on when the city cuts us down to rations. Her face drained of color, then flushed red again so fast it looked like someone had flipped a switch. "That's ridiculous. If that's true, why didn't you say so?" I tilted my head. "I did. Word for word. You just rolled your eyes and called me selfish." Behind her, the first wave of neighbors began to appear. They must have seen her SUV parked in front of my house, must have known where to find the queen bee of the HOA when things went sideways. The Andersons shuffled down their driveway, Mr. Anderson holding a half-empty watering can like a useless prop. The Ruiz family came from across the street, their teenage son still in a towel, hair dripping, clearly mid-shower when the water had given out. Even old Mrs. Beck, who never left her porch chair except for doctor's appointments, was hobbling down the sidewalk with her cane, eyes narrowed into slits of fury. One by one, they gathered behind her like an angry jury. Karen's shoulders stiffened, and for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look so sure of herself. "What's going on here?" Mrs. Ruiz demanded, her voice sharp enough to slice bread. "Yeah, Karen." Mr. Anderson chimed in, his face red with frustration. "Why don't you tell us when none of us have water?" Karen spun around, plastering on the fake smile she used at HO barbecues. "Oh, neighbors. Don't worry, we're handling it. It's just a little glitch with the city line." "Glitch? My ass," muttered the Ruiz teenager. "I heard Dad say it was the tank. The backup tank. You drained it." Gasps, angry whispers rippled through the group like sparks catching dry grass. Karen flinched, then shot me a look that screamed "shut up," but I didn't need to say a word. The crowd was turning, and nothing she said could stop the momentum. "You what?" Mrs. Beck's voice trembled, but her fury was undiluted. "You drained the community's backup." Without telling anyone, Karen raised her hands, palms out, trying to calm them. "Now hold on, let's not jump to conclusions." "We're not jumping," Mr. Anderson barked. "We're standing here without water because of you." Karen whirled back to me, her eyes wide desperate. Tell them it's not just me." I picked up my mug again, took a slow sip, and shrugged. "I warned you not to mess with it. You didn't listen. That's all there is to it." The murmurs became shouts. Someone yelled, "You should step down from the HOA board." Another voice chimed in, "She's been abusing her power for years." And then louder still, "Impeach her." The chant grew, ragged at first, but gaining rhythm. Impeach, impeach. The crowd's anger boiled over, years of pent-up resentment about petty fines, arbitrary rules, and her constant need to control every blade of grass in the neighborhood finally erupting. Karen's face twisted in horror, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. You can't do this. I am the AO. No. Mrs. Ruiz snapped, stepping forward with her arms crossed. You were. Now you're done, the crowd roared in agreement, and for the first time since she'd crowned herself queen of the coal D-sack, Karen looked small. Not powerful. Not smug. Just small, cornered by the very people she had lorded over. I leaned back in my chair, watching it all unfold, the bitter taste of coffee mixing with the sweet satisfaction of justice served cold. I didn't have to raise my voice or point a finger. She had dug her own grave with that valve handle. Eventually, the crowd began to disperse, leaving her standing alone in my driveway, humiliated, trembling, clutching her designer water bottle like it could save her from drowning in the tide of resentment. She turned toward me, eyes blazing, and hissed, "This isn't over." I smiled, calm and unbothered. "For you, it's already over." She spun on her heel, stormed back to her SUV, and peeled off with tires screeching. The neighbors lingered just long enough to thank me. Not for speaking up, but for finally letting Karen get what she deserved. As the street quieted again, I leaned back in my chair, stretched my legs, and listened to the silence. The tank would refill eventually, the system would recover, and life would return to normal. But the reign of HOA Karen, that was drained dry, with no chance of refilling.